I took the rest stop job because my sister needed help with her mortgage and I'd just been let go from a warehouse position that paid better, but required a reference I couldn't provide anymore. The rest stop gig was through a staffing agency that didn't ask many questions. 14 nights, graveyard shift, solo coverage while they waited for a permanent hire. The pay was $11 an hour, which wasn't much, but it was something. The rest stop sat on Interstate 10 about 40 miles east of the California-Arizona border. It was one of those older state-run facilities that hadn't been updated since the 90s. 2 bathroom buildings, a covered picnic area, a small visitor information kiosk, and a parking lot that could hold maybe 30 cars and a dozen semis. The landscape around it was pure Sonoran desert. Flat scrubland, creosote bushes, the occasional saguaro, and nothing else for miles in any direction. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The job was simple. Unlock the bathrooms at the start of the shift. Keep them stocked with paper towels and toilet paper, mop the floors twice during the night, lock everything back up in the morning, and log any incidents or maintenance issues in a daily report. There was a small office attached to the men's restroom building where I could sit between rounds. It had a desk, a folding chair, a mini fridge, a microwave, and a CB radio for emergencies. The woman from the staffing agency met me there on my first night to hand over keys and walk me through the procedures. Her name was Diane. She was in her 50s, wore a fleece jacket even though it was April and still warm, and had the kind of tired voice that comes from years of explaining the same things to people who won't last long enough to matter. She showed me the supply closet, the cleaning cart, the breaker panel, and the office. Then she handed me a laminated instruction sheet. "This is the nightly checklist," she said. "Follow it exactly. The state inspector's been all over this location recently and they're looking for reasons to shut it down. If you skip steps, it'll show up in the records." I looked at the list. Most of it was standard. Unlock doors, check lights, clean floors, restock supplies, lock doors. But there were a few things that stood out. The second to last item said, "If you observe vehicles in the parking lot after 3 a.m., note the count, but do not approach the vehicles or attempt to identify the occupants." The last item said, "If the lot is completely empty at any point during your shift, remain inside the office and do not perform exterior checks until vehicle traffic resumes." I looked up at Diane. "What's that about?" "Safety protocol," she said. "This stretch of the interstate doesn't get much traffic at night. Sometimes you'll have long stretches with no one stopping. If that happens, you stay inside. There's been issues in the past with people getting stranded out here acting unpredictably. It's safer not to engage." "What kind of issues?" "Just stay inside if the lot's empty. That's all you need to know." She gave me her cell number, told me to call if there was an emergency the CB couldn't handle, and left. I started the shift by unlocking the bathrooms and doing a walkthrough. Both buildings were old but functional. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, metal stall doors, the kind of industrial fixtures that could survive decades of hard use. The men's room had 4 stalls and 3 urinals. The women's room had 6 stalls. Everything smelled like industrial cleaner and desert dust. The parking lot had 2 cars in it when I started. A sedan near the picnic area and a pickup truck by the men's room. Both were empty. I assumed the drivers were using the facilities or stretching their legs. By the time I finished my first walkthrough and went back to the office, both vehicles were gone. The first few hours were quiet. A handful of cars stopped. People used the restrooms, walked their dogs in the gravel area near the picnic tables, and left. I restocked paper towels twice and mopped the men's room at 1 a.m. The lot was never completely empty during that time. There was always at least 1 or 2 vehicles. At 2047 a.m., I looked out the office window and realized the lot was empty. No cars, no trucks, nothing. I checked the highway. I could see headlights in both directions, but no one was slowing down to exit. I sat there and watched for a few minutes. The traffic on the interstate was light but steady. Vehicles passed every 30 seconds or so. None of them took the exit. I remember the instruction. If the lot is completely empty, remain inside the office. I stayed in the office. At 3:12 a.m., a sedan pulled in. It parked near the women's room, and a couple got out. They used the restroom, got back in their car, and left. After that, traffic resumed normally. A truck, a van, another car. The lot was never empty again for the rest of the shift. I logged the incident in my report. Parking lot empty from approximately 2047 a.m. to 3:12 a.m. No exterior checks performed per protocol. The next night was the same. Quiet traffic until around 2:30 a.m., then a gradual slowdown, then nothing. The lot was empty from 20:54 a.m. to 30:18 a.m. I stayed in the office. When a car finally pulled in, I went out to check the bathrooms and everything was fine. On the third night, I started paying more attention to the pattern. The lot began to empty around 2:30 a.m. By 2:30 a.m., by 2:50, there were no vehicles. I sat in the office and watched the highway. Traffic was still passing, but no one was exiting. I counted 23 vehicles in the span of 10 minutes. None of them slowed down. At 30:05 a.m., the CB radio crackled. I looked at it. The radio was an old Cobra model, the kind long-haul truckers used before everyone switched to cell phones. It was set to channel 19, the standard highway channel. I'd heard a few transmissions earlier in the night, mostly drivers calling out their positions or asking about road conditions ahead. The radio crackled again, and a voice came through. Rest stop ahead on your right. Lights are on. Repeat, rest stop is open. I picked up the handset and pressed the talk button. This is the rest stop attendant. We're open. Facilities are available. No response. I waited. The radio stayed silent. At 3:14 a.m., a truck pulled into the lot. It parked near the men's room. The driver got out, used the bathroom, and left. After that, normal traffic resumed. I logged it. Parking lot empty from 2050 a.m. to 3:14 a.m. CB transmission received at 3005 a.m. Content unclear. On the fourth night, I decided to test something. When the lot started to empty around 2:30, I went outside and stood near the picnic area where I had a clear view of the highway. I wanted to see if there was something about the rest stop itself that was making drivers avoid the exit, or if it was just random. By 2:55, the lot was empty and I was standing alone in the gravel. I watched the interstate. Cars and trucks passed at regular intervals, headlights cutting through the dark. None of them slowed. None of them signaled. It was like the exit didn't exist. At 3:02 a.m., I heard the CB radio from inside the office. I walked back and listened through the open door. Rest stop ahead. Lights are on, open for business. Same voice as before. Flat, emotionless, like someone reading from a script. I went inside and picked up the handset. This is the attendant. Can you identify your location? Silence. I tried again. If you're nearby and need assistance, I'm here. Nothing. At 3:16 a.m., a car pulled in. The lot returned to normal. I didn't log the CB transmission this time. I logged empty lot, but I left out the radio. On the fifth night, I started looking at the older reports. There was a file cabinet in the office, with maintenance logs, inspection records, and shift reports going back about 3 years. I pulled the reports from the previous attendant, a guy named Eric Millhouse who'd worked the position for 8 months before quitting in February. His reports were thorough. He noted every supply restock, every burnt-out light, every clogged drain. But he never mentioned the empty lot. He never mentioned the CB radio. His logs showed consistent activity throughout every shift, no gaps, no anomalies. I checked the reports from the attendant before him, a woman named Carla Pineda. Same thing. Normal traffic, normal incidents, nothing unusual. I went back further. The attendant before Carla was a man named Dennis Ruiz. His reports covered a 2-year period, and they were nearly identical to the others. Routine, procedural, nothing strange. But at the very end of Dennis's file, there was a handwritten note clipped to his final report. It said, recommend updated protocol for low traffic periods. Suggest attendant remain inside office during extended vacancies. The note was dated November of 3 years ago. That was 6 months before the remain inside rule appeared on the instruction sheet. I put the file back and sat at the desk. The lot was empty. It was 3:01 a.m. The CB crackled. Rest stop ahead. Lights on. Facilities available. I didn't pick up the handset this time. I just listened. The voice repeated the message twice, then went silent. At 3:19 a.m., a truck pulled in. On the sixth night, I brought a notebook and started writing down everything. I noted the time the lot started to empty. I noted the time it became completely vacant. I noted the exact time of the CB transmission. I noted the time the first vehicle returned. The pattern was consistent. Lot begins to empty, 2:28 a.m. to 2:35 a.m. Lot completely empty, 2:50 a.m. to 3 a.m. CB transmission, 3 a.m. to 3 a.m. to 3 a.m. to 3:08 a.m. First vehicle returns, 3:42 a.m. to 3:14 a.m. to 3:29 a.m. The window was tight, but it repeated every night. I also started watching the highway more carefully during the empty period. The traffic didn't stop. Cars and trucks kept passing. I counted them. On the sixth night, 41 vehicles passed the rest stop exit between 2:50 and 3:14 a.m. Not one of them slowed down, but the rest stop was visible from the highway. The lights were on. The signs were lit. There was no reason for drivers to ignore it unless they couldn't see it. On the 7th night, I decided to try something different. At 2:45 a.m., I turned off all the exterior lights. The parking lot went dark. The sign went dark. The only light came from the office and the bathrooms, and those were dim. I stood outside and watched the highway. At 2:52 a.m., a truck slowed down and took the exit. It pulled into the lot, parked near the office, and the driver got out. He was a man in his 40s wearing a denim jacket and a baseball cap. He looked around, saw me standing there, and nodded. "Restrooms open?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He used the men's room and came back out. "You just open up?" "No, I've been here since 11. He looked at the dark sign. "Couldn't see the place from the road. Thought it was closed." "Lights were on earlier," I said. He shrugged. "Didn't see them." He got back in his truck and left. I turned the exterior lights back on. At 3:05 a.m., the lot was empty again. The CB crackled. "Rest stop ahead. Lights on. Open for business." I picked up the handset. "Who is this?" Silence. "If you're out there, identify yourself." Nothing. At 3:17 a.m., a car pulled in. The lot returned to normal. I logged the light test but left out the CB. On the 8th night, I called Diane. It was 3:30 a.m. after the lot had refilled. I used my cell phone because the office landline didn't have an outgoing line. She answered on the 5th ring. Her voice was groggy. "This is Diane. It's the rest stop attendant. Sorry to wake you. I have a question about the protocol." A pause. "What protocol?" "The one about staying inside when the lot's empty. Why does that happen?" "Why does the lot empty out every night?" Another pause. "It's a low traffic area. Sometimes there are gaps. It's not random. It happens at the same time every night. And there's a CB transmission that comes through during the gap. Someone's saying the rest stop is open. Do you know anything about that?" Silence. "Diane, follow the protocol. Stay inside when the lot's empty. Don't go outside. Don't engage with anything unusual. Just do the job and file your reports. I need to know what's happening." "No, you don't. You need to finish your 2 weeks and move on. That's all." She hung up. I sat there holding the phone. On the 9th night, I stayed outside during the empty period. I wanted to see what happened if I didn't follow the protocol. At 2:52 a.m., the lot was empty. I stood near the picnic area and watched the highway. Traffic continued to pass. None of it slowed. At 3:04 a.m., the CB radio crackled inside the office. I walked to the door and listened. "Rest stop ahead. Lights on. Facilities available." I went inside and picked up the handset. "I'm standing right here. I can hear you. Who are you?" Silence. I tried a different approach. "Are you a driver? Are you on the highway?" Nothing. I put the handset down and went back outside. At 3:06 a.m., I saw headlights approaching from the west. A car was slowing down. It took the exit and pulled into the lot. It was an older sedan, maybe from the early 2000s, with a faded paint job and a cracked windshield. It parked near the women's room, but no one got out. I walked toward it. The windows were tinted, but I could see a shape in the driver's seat. A person sitting still, facing forward. I stopped a few feet from the car. "You need anything?" No response. I stepped closer. "Restrooms are open if you need them." The driver didn't move. I leaned down to get a better look through the windshield. The driver's seat was empty. I stepped back. The shape I'd seen was still there, but now I could tell it wasn't a person. It was a shadow. A dark outline that didn't match the interior of the car, like a cutout placed against the seat. I turned and walked back to the office. At 3:18 a.m., I looked out the window. The sedan was gone. At 3:21 a.m., a truck pulled in. Normal traffic resumed. I logged the incident. Unknown vehicle in lot during empty period. Driver did not exit. Vehicle departed without using facilities. On the 10th night, I reviewed the old inspection records. There was a state inspection report from 18 months ago. The inspector had noted several code violations, including insufficient lighting in the parking lot, damaged pavement near the picnic area, and outdated signage. The report recommended repairs within 90 days or the facility would be subject to closure. The repairs had been completed. There was a follow-up inspection 6 months later confirming compliance, but there was a separate document filed with the inspection records. There was a letter from the regional director of the State Parks Department to the county facilities manager. The letter was dated 2 years ago, and it referenced an incident at the rest stop. The letter didn't describe the incident in detail. It only said, "Following the event of September 14th, we recommend implementing revised safety protocols for night shift staff at the location." Attendants should be instructed to remain inside the office during periods of low or no traffic. Exterior patrols should be limited to high traffic hours only. September 14th was 2 years ago. I searched the file cabinet for any reports from that date. Nothing. I checked the shift logs. There was no attendant listed for September 14th. The log showed a gap. The previous entry was September 12th, and the next entry was September 18th. I checked the maintenance records. There was a note dated September 16th, exterior lighting repaired, parking lot resurfaced, office door lock replaced. I sat there trying to piece it together. Something had happened on September 14th. An incident serious enough to warrant a letter from the regional director. After that, the protocols changed. After that, attendants were told to stay inside when the lot was empty. On the 11th night, I stayed outside again. This time, I wanted to see if the car would come back. At 2:55 a.m., the lot was empty. I stood near the edge of the parking area and waited. At 3:33 a.m., the CB crackled. Rest stop ahead. Lights on. Open for business. At 3:07 a.m., the sedan appeared. It came from the east, slowing down as it approached the exit. It pulled into the lot and parked in the same spot as before, near the women's room. I walked toward it. The driver's seat had the same shadow. A dark shape that didn't belong. I stopped a few feet away and stared at it. The shadow didn't move. I walked around to the passenger side and looked through that window. The back seat was empty. The front passenger seat was empty. The front passenger seat was empty. But the shadow in the driver's seat was still there, and now I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a shadow. It was an absence. A space where light didn't reach, shaped like a person sitting upright. I stepped back. The car's headlights were off, but I could see the dashboard glowing faintly. The ignition was on. I walked back to the office. At 3:19 a.m., the sedan was gone. At 3:24 a.m., a truck pulled in. On the 12th night, I found the old attendant's file. It was buried in the back of the file cabinet behind the inspection records. A personnel file for someone named Cameron Vitelli. The file was thin. It had a job application, a signed copy of the employee handbook, and a separation notice. Cameron Vitelli had worked the night shift at the rest stop for 3 weeks in September 2 years ago. The separation notice was dated September 15th. The reason listed was voluntary resignation. There was a handwritten note clipped to the separation form. It said, employee did not return for scheduled shift on 9/14. No call, no show. Personal effects collected from office on 9/16 by family member. Position considered abandoned. I read it twice. Cameron Vitelli had disappeared on September 14th, the same date referenced in the regional director's letter. I checked the job application. Cameron had listed an emergency contact, a brother named Joel Vitelli with a phone number and an address in Yuma. I took a picture of the page with my phone. On the 13th night, I called the number. It was 4 a.m. After the lot had refilled and everything was quiet. I used my cell phone and stood outside the office. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. A man's voice said to leave a message. I hung up and tried again an hour later. This time someone answered, "Yeah?" The voice was rough, irritated. "Is this Joel Vitelli? Who's asking?" "My name's Sam. I'm working at the rest stop on I-10 east of the border." I found a file for Cameron Vitelli, and it listed you as an emergency contact. "I wanted to ask you about what happened." A long silence. "You working there now?" "Yeah." "Night shift." Another silence. "You should quit." "I need to know what happened to Cameron." "Cameron's gone." "That's what happened." "Gone how?" "Gone like gone. Like he went to work one night and never came back. They found his car in the parking lot the next morning. Keys in the ignition, wallet on the seat, no sign of him. Did the police investigate?" "Yeah, they didn't find anything. No body, no evidence, nothing. They said he probably walked off into the desert." They said people do that sometimes. Have a breakdown, just walk away. But that wasn't Cameron. He wouldn't do that. What do you think happened? I think that place took him. I think whatever's out there at night took him. And it'll take you too if you're not careful. What do you mean, whatever's out there? I don't know what it is. Cameron called me a few times during his first week. He said the place felt wrong. He said cars would stop and no one would get out. He said he heard voices on the radio telling him to come outside. He said the parking lot would empty out at the same time every night like clockwork, and he was supposed to stay inside, but he didn't know why. Did he stay inside? Not on the last night. He told me he was going to figure out what was happening. He said he was going to stay outside during the empty period and see what showed up. I told him not to. I told him to just finish the shift and quit. But he didn't listen. I didn't say anything. You still there? Joel asked. Yeah. Listen to me. Quit that job. Don't go back. Don't try to figure it out. Just leave. I can't. I need the money. Then stay inside. Follow the rules. Don't go outside when the lot's empty. Don't answer the radio. Don't look at the cars. Just stay inside and do your job. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone. It was 5:17 a.m. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. My shift ended in less than 2 hours. I went back inside the office and sat at the desk. On the 14th night, I decided I wasn't going to follow the rules. I needed to know. At 2:50 a.m., the lot was empty. I went outside and stood in the middle of the parking area. At 3:04 a.m., the CB crackled. Rest stop ahead. Lights on, facilities available. I didn't go inside. I stayed where I was. At 3:08 a.m., the sedan appeared. It came from the east, just like before. It pulled into the lot and parked near the women's room. I walked toward it. The shadow was in the driver's seat. I stopped next to the car and looked directly at it. Up close, I could see it wasn't just an absence of light. It was a shape, a human shape, but wrong. The proportions were off. The head was too large. The shoulders were too narrow. It sat perfectly still, facing forward. I reached for the door handle. The moment my hand touched the metal, the shape turned toward me. It didn't have a face. It was just a void, smooth and featureless, but I could feel it looking at me. I stepped back. The shape turned forward again. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. A man was standing near the picnic area. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he was staring at me. I didn't recognize him. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me. I looked back at the car. The shadow was gone. The driver's seat was empty. When I turned back to the picnic area, the man was gone too. I walked quickly back to the office and locked the door. At 3:19 a.m., I looked out the window. The sedan was still there. At 3:24 a.m., it was gone. At 3:31 a.m., a truck pulled in. Normal traffic resumed. I sat at the desk shaking. At 6:45 a.m., I locked up the bathrooms and left. I drove home and slept for 4 hours. When I woke up, I called the staffing agency and told them I wasn't coming back. Diane didn't argue. She just said, "Understood. We'll process your final paycheck." I asked her if she knew what happened to Cameron Vitelli. She said, "I don't discuss former employees." I hung up. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been looking for work since then. I haven't found anything. My sister's mortgage is past due and I don't have enough to help her anymore. I've been thinking about calling the agency back, asking if the rest stop job is still available. I know I shouldn't, but I keep thinking about the empty lot, the shadow in the car, the man by the picnic area. I keep thinking about the CB transmission. Rest stop ahead, lights on, facilities available. I don't know what it means. I don't know what the place is or what it wants, but I know the job is still open. I know because I drove past the rest stop 2 days ago in the middle of the afternoon. I didn't stop. I just slowed down as I passed the exit. There was a car in the parking lot, an older sedan with a faded paint job and a cracked windshield. It was parked near the women's room. I kept driving. Last night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. There was silence on the other end, and a voice flat and emotionless. Rest stop ahead, lights on, open for business. I hung up. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. It kept ringing. I turned the phone off. This morning I got a letter in the mail. It was from the staffing agency. It said my final shift had been logged and my paycheck was ready for pickup. But the letter also included a new assignment notice. It said I'd been scheduled for another 14 nights at the rest stop starting tomorrow. It said the position was mandatory due to staffing shortages. It said failure to report would result in legal action for breach of contract. I don't remember signing a contract. I called the agency. Diane answered. "I got a letter," I said. "It says I'm scheduled for another 2 weeks." "That's correct. I quit. I told you I wasn't coming back." "You didn't complete your full assignment. The contract requires 14 nights. You worked 13. I never signed a contract. You accepted the position. That constitutes agreement. I'm not going back." "Then we'll forward the matter to collections. You'll owe us for the training materials, the uniform deposit, and the breach penalty. It comes to about $2,000. I didn't say anything. "Or," Diane said, "you can work one more night. Finish the assignment. We'll close the file and you'll never hear from us again." One more night. Yes. I thought about it. I thought about my sister's mortgage. I thought about the $2,000 I didn't have. "Fine," I said. "One more night." "Good. Your shift starts at 11 p.m. tomorrow. She hung up. I'm writing this now because I don't know if I'll be able to write it later. I'm going back to the rest stop tomorrow night. I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to stay inside when the lot empties. I'm not going to answer the CB. I'm not going to go near the sedan. I'm going to finish the shift and leave. That's the plan. But I keep thinking about Cameron Vitelli. I keep thinking about the shadow in the driver's seat. I keep thinking about the man by the picnic area. I keep thinking about the voice on the phone. Rest stop ahead. Lights on. Open for business. I don't think the rest stop is a rest stop anymore. I think it's something else. I think it's a door. And I think it's been waiting for me.